The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Robert Mueller's investigation into Russia, possible coordination between the Donald Trump campaign and Russians, continues to pick up steam, even as the president calls the whole thing a witch hunt. So we have learned that Robert Mueller's team subpoenaed the Trump organization in recent weeks, asking for documents relating to President Trump's businesses and Russia. What's notable here is that a couple of months ago, the Trump organization voluntarily handed over documents to Robert Mueller's team having to do with Trump's businesses from 2015 on, primarily according to sources. And so it appears that Robert Mueller's team looked through these documents and decided that it wasn't enough, that it felt like it wanted to issue a subpoena to make sure that it had everything it needs for the investigation.
That was the voice of Pamela Brown, CNN senior White House correspondent, discussing Bob Mueller's investigation now crossing that red line that Donald Trump laid out for Bob Mueller back in July in an interview with the New York Times. He said Donald Trump told Mueller, saying that don't get into his family's personal finances and that of his personal business outside of the Russia probe. Well, it looks as though Bob Mueller doesn't really care. And listening to Pamela Brown, she put it into context, the same context that the New York Times article, the original reporting from the New York Times. You can find the link in the description. But this came about as a result of Mueller already reviewing financial records from the Trump organization that they voluntarily turned over a few months ago. And now, after reviewing those financial records, Mueller decided that he needed to subpoena additional records. This is as close as it has gotten to the president. What he's going to find, who knows? Nobody really knows what he's going to find. He believes that there is something there. And because of the parameters of his investigation, the parameters are loose enough to allow him to follow anything that may arise as a result of his investigation into Russia. And that therein lies the biggest threat. Conversations amongst the pundits and politicals have always included the possibility of money laundering, some crimes that may not be directly tied to Russia, but because of the latitude that he's been given, Bob Mueller's been given by the Department of Justice, he has the ability to follow the breadcrumbs. So now if he looked into the personal records, or rather into the financial records of the Trump organization a few months ago, as a result of his investigation into Russia, he found nothing with regards to Russia. And then he saw something else as he was looking for something related to Russia. And he found something that was, money laundering, for example. Then he could follow those breadcrumbs. This is probably, let's just be real. With organizations as large as the Trump organization, privately held, not constrained by public reporting and quarterly reporting, there are all kinds of possibilities that they would find. The real question is, how far does it go? Does it go to the president of the United States? Is it indictable? Is it big enough to indict the president of the United States? And the president and his team have intentionally done everything they could possibly do to block this investigation from actually touching the president. Bloomberg.com reported on it this morning, saying, quote, Trump and his lawyers have thrown down all sorts of gauntlets around Mueller's probe. They have argued for a tight deadline leading to its conclusion, negotiated for where, when, and how the president might agree to an interview with investigators, and pointed to areas that they think are off limits. And then they concluded here saying, quote, it would appear that Mueller, with the full force of the law and subpoena power behind him, intends to proceed as he sees fit. And the president has thrown warnings out there that he's willing to replace Jeff Sessions. And if he replaces Jeff Sessions, that means he can put in an attorney general that, one, he expects loyalty from, two, that would not be that would not have recused himself from or herself from the investigation, and then three, would have the ability to intervene into the investigation by Bob Mueller and potentially stop the investigation all out. So I believe that we will see a move like that. It's very possible. He's already tossing out Everybody. It's even reported that H.R. McMaster's is going to potentially step down in the near future. So the president has no problem whatsoever turning over the entirety of his cabinet, even in the first year and a half. But particularly with Jeff Sessions, that would give him an opportunity to put a buffer there to prevent any potential indictment. And the real question is, if the president actually does that, what will we do? What will Americans do? I mean, of course, you're going to have the contrarians who say it's nothing, right? There's always going to be that group. But I think at that point, everyone should be alarmed by the open willingness and brazenness of the president of the United States to do anything he wants to do, and not only do it, but get away with it because his party is complicit, but then also have the executive branch, the president of the United States, so willingly throw us into a constitutional crisis. And all for the sake of covering his, you know what? And it all depends on what Bob Mueller finds in the subpoenaed financial records from the Trump organization.
Michael Avenatti.
Yeah.
Was she threatened in any way?
Yes.
Was she threatened physical harm?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
What do you mean by that? Was her life threatened?
I'm not going to answer that. People will have to tune in to 60 Minutes on March 25th.
Okay, now we're back to the deep tease.
The voices that you heard were that of Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe interviewing Stormy Daniels' attorney, Michael Avenatti. Of course, you heard Joe in the background and a couple of other characters. But this happened this morning, and as you could faintly hear Joe say in the background, wow, we made news. And in fact, they did. The headline across the country right now, just as this morning, Stormy Daniels' lawyer stuns Morning Joe with revelation. She was threatened with physical harm. Of course, Stormy Daniels, who I have not covered on this show, is the allegedly the mistress or had an affair with the president of the United States. And just prior to the election in 2016, she was allegedly paid money. Well, actually, no, I think we can confirm that she was paid money. Trump's attorney, one of his personal attorneys, admitted to paying her money out of his personal pocket. I'm just so used to saying alleged because that's what they just tell you to say, just to cover our own butts. But she was paid money, and now she believes that she is free to speak, even though she had a confidentiality agreement, non-disclosure agreement. But because of the other party to the agreement didn't sign, there's some gray area there. She's taken full advantage of that gray area, and she will be interviewed on 60 Minutes on March 25th. And this is what her attorney, Michael Avenatti, appeared on Morning Joe to promote. And I'm quite sure, because I know how this thing works, I'm quite sure that he had every intention to do exactly what he did. And I don't know if it was coordinated, but Mika sat there. If you look at the clip, she sat there really in deep thought and came up with a really good question to which he had a very surprising answer. And so listen to a little bit more. And even though he did not answer any further questions, he is doing a hell of a sales job to get everyone to tune in. I mean, I don't know the last time I watched 60 Minutes. And I honestly, as you could tell, this is my first time even mentioning Stormy Daniels on my show. So that should let you know to what extent I actually cared about this interview even existing and whether or not I was going to watch it. I had no intention of watching it. But this man did a hell of a sales job, and he and Stormy Daniels deserve whatever paycheck 60 Minutes is going to give them, because I'm tuning. Even Dixon is tuning in. Listen to this real quick.
There's obviously so much more here.
Well, no. So what can you tell us about the threats, the physical threats?
I can't tell you anything beyond what I've already said. Again, I think.
Can you tell us whether it came from the president directly, the physical threats?
I'm not going to answer that.
Will you deny that the president of the United States threatened your client?
I will not confirm or deny.
Will you confirm or deny that in the 60 Minutes interview?
Again, I think it will become apparent to people when they tune into 60 Minutes on March 25 as to the details relating to the threat, and the American people can judge for themselves on who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth. And again, we're not trying to silence anyone. We want both sides to lay out their version of the facts so the American people can decide for themselves what happened.
Yeah, that's a hell of a sales job. So, again, I've paid just, whatever comes across my timeline on social media. That's as much attention as I paid to this particular part of the story. Now, I'm thinking back. Did I cover Stormy Daniels? I have to actually, because I've done so many stories. I may actually have covered Stormy Daniels. So I have to take back what I said earlier. But if I covered it, it might have been for content news. Anyway, the point is, if I covered it, I'm sure I said then what I'm getting ready to say now. I honestly don't care. I don't care about the infidelity of anybody. What two consenting adults do is their business. And it's the business of Melania, the woman he cheated on. That's an inter-family problem. What I do care about is the hypocrisy from the evangelical right who don't care about this whatsoever. And I do care about whatever potential threat. So now this is actually a thing, right? This is actually a thing that has even further reaching ramifications than just infidelity. So that's it. I don't really want to talk about it anymore outside of that.
Well, they are within their First Amendment rights to believe what they want to believe, and they are within their First Amendment rights to say what they want to say. If they had all come to Charlottesville, they hadn't planned violence, and they had just paraded around town peacefully celebrating with a swastika, as offensive and reprehensible as I find that to be, they are protected in doing that. But our allegation in this complaint, and it's pretty detailed and comprehensive, is that's not what they did. So for months and months leading up to Charlottesville, they engaged in an enormous amount of communication, planning, and coordination about things like what weapons to bring with them to Charlottesville, how to make it look like you're acting in self-defense when you're really committing violence. They actually, believe it or not, talked about using protesters as speed bumps, which is obviously tragic and horrific in light of what happened to Heather Heyer. And then on August 11th and 12th, that's exactly what happened. And then after it happened, they all celebrated what had happened as a success of their long-held plans. That's not free speech. That's a conspiracy.
That was the voice of Roberta Kaplan. She is one of the attorneys that is suing the leaders and the organizers of the Unite the Right rally that took place last year in Charlottesville, Virginia, which injured multiple people and killed Heather Heyer. She was interviewed this morning on NPR by Rachel Martin. And the context of the interview was simply about the motivations behind this lawsuit. And is there any precedent for this? Is this lawsuit any type of infringement on the right to free speech? That lawsuit will work itself out, and we'll see how it comes out. But I really think it's time again to have another conversation on the limitations of free speech, particularly where it intersects with white supremacy, white nationalism, and Nazism. There's a strong, you know what? The best way to start this is to read you a tweet that I shared, and it took me a while to find it, but I think this tweet is magnificent. It's by @InnerPartisan on Twitter. He has a AVI of, or he or she or they have an AVI of Worf from Star Trek. But anyway, I digress. I'll put a link in the description. And this is what that person said. They said the best propaganda move the fash, meaning fascists, have pulled was reframing their propaganda as a free speech issue. Instead of, quote, the Holocaust never happened, it's, quote, why won't anyone let me say that the Holocaust never happened? And boom, instant support from conservatives for Holocaust denial. I would argue the only thing additional that I would say to this is that it's not only conservatives who argue that, it's also free speech absolutists on the left, libertarian styled leftist. And for many in this group, that becomes the most important thing. They prioritize that above anything else. Never mind what never mind what Nazis and Holocaust deniers and fascists are arguing and organizing around and for. Right? This is something that we tried to explain, and it would be interesting to see how this lawsuit includes this discussion that what they discuss inherently leads to violence. What they are discussing is violence. Any type of purge, ethnic cleansing, an ethno-state. The steps required to get to an ethno-state inherently require violence against marginalized people. And so if for you, the most important thing is free speech absolutism, so that no matter what they say, they are free to say it. And not only are they free to say it, but you also are going even further. And this is the most dangerous part of it. They go one step further and they insist on allowing these voices to be platformed, to give them an opportunity to spread this dogma. And not only, I mean, this is to a free speech absolutist. They're like, of course. Well, of course, that's what they should do. You know, it should be a competition of ideas in the marketplace. Their ideas include violence, genocide, ethnic cleansing, mass displacement of millions of people. This is what they are organizing and discussing. And so if their language inherently is violent, how close is it akin to yelling fire in a movie theater? That's sort of the basis of this, of the lawsuit, but also the lawsuit itself, against which Richard Spencer can't find any attorney to defend him. It's also the fact that they have a long-standing history of planning that particular event. And so if you look at what they're saying in context, once they get on that stage and free speech absolutists are arguing, let them get on stage. So don't deplatform them. That's a First Amendment violation. If you take everything that they're saying in context of what they are discussing on the internet, then you cannot look at what they're saying on stage and not admit that it is pure violence. One more tweet that nails it. Phoenix Khalida on Twitter. I retweeted this and I'll share the link in the description. She said, quote, I really wish the free speech absolutists who insist we just need to, quote, engage in the free marketplace of ideas, end quote, would actually engage in that marketplace and check white supremacists, misogynists, and homophobes harder than they check me for criticizing their hate speech. You know, because in a way, this is really what it boils down to, right? It really boils down to our competing First Amendment rights and who's going to be loudest. Right. And then if we're the loudest and we've assembled and we have more numbers and our numbers just dwarf what they have and they can't have their event because we're too loud, then whose rights are actually being violated? It's really just a competition of rights, and our rights won. More people believe what we believe. But then it becomes a thing where, you know, they want us to hold back our First Amendment rights. They, being free speech absolutists, want us to hold back, restrain our First Amendment rights to give an opportunity to people who are inherently violent to be platformed and to spread their ideology. And then, I'm sorry, but then at what point are we in the marketplace of competing ideas? At what point should we be, when should we speak up? Should we speak up when they actually commit violence? See, this is mighty convenient for people who are not the target of that violence. You see, most of the people that you see out here arguing this and standing on free speech absolutism, if you look at them, they're generally not in one of the marginalized categories. They're generally white men. I don't care if they're white conservative men, white progressive men, white neoliberal men. They are generally white men. Therefore, they have never been the target of this, of the free speech absolutism that they're championing so much. They've never been a target of these groups who are there. They will be included in the ethno state. They'll be just fine. While the rest of us are the victims of this violence that we had to sit by and allow to organize and fester and to grow like a malignant cancer, all in the name of free speech absolutism. Their language, with their ideas, their goals are inherently violent. They lead to violence, like the death of Heather Heyer in Charlottesville, and to the people, the 3 individuals who had their legs completely crushed and had to have their legs rebuilt as a result of the same attack that killed Heather Heyer. The language of these fascists is inherently violent, but it also leads to actual violence. And so at what point do we speak up? It appears to me that free speech absolutists feel that it's merely ideas. That's nothing more than ideas. None more inherently dangerous than the other. Because for you to absolutely require that we be silent and restrain our First Amendment rights just so that they can have an opportunity to organize and destroy us, this is madness. This is madness. This is clearly people who don't have anything at risk. And here's the other subtle shade of this, that, for people who have generally been in the privileged position in American history, it's not controversial to say that white men have been privileged in this country since the founding of this country. For them who have never been the oppressed in this country, I mean, let's be real. It's always been a good deal to be a white man in America. Perhaps this is the only type of oppression that quote unquote oppression that they've ever experienced. And so for them not to be able to say whatever they want to say, whenever they want to say, no matter how harmful it is to other communities, to them, that's oppression. Do you see how twisted that is? And so for some of these free speech absolutists, they feel like this is genuinely a fight for civil rights and the First Amendment rights so that they can be free. And isn't it something that the only freedoms that they have to fight for is the freedom to be able to insult and oppress other people? What does that say? That is genuinely real privilege. While the rest of us have had to fight just for freedom in general, freedom from actual oppression, the rest of us have had to fight for our right to exist, our right to vote, our right to be free, our right to not be subjected to the hate of other groups. Funny. And because this fight is not over, people who swear that they're our allies, like Phoenix said on Twitter, shouldn't you be fighting more on behalf of us? Because really, we're talking about 90% of the time, we're talking about arguments on social media. So we're already in the public square. And so at that point, why are you fighting so hard on behalf of them? They have their rights to speak. They have their rights to organize. What you're limiting is our right to counter-organize, to counter-protest, to fight back against it. Richard Spencer has had to cancel the rest of his college tour because Antifa has blocked him at every stop. If you feel like it is more of a transgression for the anti-fascist in America to shut down a fascist than it is for a fascist to be able to go around colleges in the name of free speech, but using the guise of free speech as an opportunity to grow his platform, which is inherently violent. If you can't see the difference between the two, but then two, if you can't see the nobility in the former versus the latter, then can you really call yourself our ally? The Constitution is not just some abstract collection of rights that need to be upheld outside of the context of who's being affected by those rights. You can't separate the Constitution from the people who empower the Constitution. And if you are fighting more about the abstract ideas in the Constitution, which are, generally noble and worth fighting for, but you're fighting more for that than the people who give the Constitution its authority, we become slaves then to the Constitution. We become slaves to the right of a person to organize for our demise, organize to destroy us. And that, by definition, undermines the spirit of why the Constitution was written in the first place. I remember from second grade, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility to provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain, we the people do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. The spirit of the Constitution, the purpose for which it was written, was not to enslave us to rules, not individuals. It was to constrain the government. And in what we're seeing right now is more of a competition between individuals. And what free speech absolutists are attempting to do, they are attempting to constrain us with the Constitution on behalf of people because they feel it's the noble thing to do, to protect the most disgusting ideas in our society. If we protect the most disgusting ideas in our society, then they expect that it would trickle down to everyone else. But when has any benefit in the United States actually trickled down? We're talking about a privileged elite group of white men with the money and the infrastructure to organize thousands and thousands of people across this country, and you expect that if we fight on behalf of their free speech rights, that they are going to allow that to trickle down to the rest of us? We'll all be dead or displaced by the time some of these free speech absolutists get the picture. They have used the Constitution to damn us instead of ensure us domestic tranquility.
Let me just say I'm sorry that it gives me no pleasure to talk this afternoon about the state of our politics, about the damage that is being done, and my party's seeming amnesia in the face of it. There is no damage like the damage a president can do. This is not a normal political speech, for these are not normal political times. But then never has a party abandoned, fled its principles and deeply held beliefs so quickly as my party did in the face of the nativist juggernaut. If my party is going to try to pass off the degradation of the United States and her values from the White House as normal, if we're going to cloister ourselves in the alternative truth of an erratic leader, if we are going to refuse to live in the world that everyone else lives in and reckon with the daily reality that they face, including their very real and understandable anxiety that they feel, then my party might not deserve to lead.
Well, I think it's safe to say that Jeff Flake is going to run for president in the Republican Party. The real question now is there any Republican Party left distinguishable from Donald Trump? Donald Trump has given them the crown jewel, the tax breaks. They honestly don't care anymore, Jeff. I'm not falling for you, Jeff, because I know your politics are just as bad as Donald Trump's. You just have a mild-mannered tone. And that's the problem with the Republican Party. They are Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the face. I said this yesterday. But the real question is there anyone there who has crappy politics but don't want the oafish nature of Donald Trump for another 4 years? That's the real question. Jeff Flake is going to fight for the same tax breaks. Jeff Flake is going to fight for the attack on women's rights to choose. He's going to do all the things that Republicans love. He's just saying that I want to do it in a more mild, moderated tone with a very soft southwestern kind of drawl and a really calming demeanor. So the real question is there anything left of the Republican Party? See, there were a lot of theories. There were a lot of theories that floated around what would happen if Donald Trump won. Jimmy Dore's theory was if Donald Trump wins, then we'll have this, there'll be a great progressive revolution where it's not happening. Other people said if Donald Trump won, actually, this was my take, and I was wrong about this one. I said if Donald Trump wins, that there's going to be an outpouring of fundraising and shore up the Democratic Party. I was wrong because fundraising really sucks for the Democratic Party because generally they suck. But what has happened is that the Democratic establishment, contrary to those other theories, has become intransigent. They become emboldened. They're hardened. But there was one theory that I didn't say because I really didn't want to think about Donald Trump winning. Maybe I did I say so many things I honestly can't remember, but I didn't really push it. And the theory that I had in my head that I may have referenced was that if Donald Trump wins, that's really the only way to destroy the Republican Party, because Donald Trump flirting in the general election and losing, then the Republican Party would have returned back to what it was. But now the public face of the Republican Party is white supremacy. And they have embraced it. Look at Steve Bannon. He said that, what was it, last week? He said you should wear the label of racist proudly. And now we're coming to a head. Now, whether my theory was correct or not really depends on really Jeff Flake and anyone who would oppose Donald Trump. And then and I'm thinking as we go, that might undermine my idea. The real question is, what happens to the Republican Party now? We've seen that there is a base in the United States, a bottom floor of racist white supremacists, which is about 33%. Those are the people who love Donald Trump no matter what he does, because they love his oafishness. They love his acrimony. They love how combative he is. They love how insulting he is. They embrace it when he calls Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. They love that. They eat it up. That's about 33% of the electorate. That's not enough to win. But then you have that other 17%, just the math I did yesterday, that are indifferent to it. They may not be pleased by it. They may not be overjoyed like that 33% who revel in it, but they're indifferent to it. And that's just enough for him to win again. And so the question I'm asking is the same question that Jeff Flake is asking. Is there anything left in the Republican Party that can be redeemed from Donald Trump? I would argue no, because Donald Trump has simply revealed who the Republicans really were all along. They don't have to be ashamed of their bigotry anymore. They don't have to be ashamed of their hypocrisy anymore. They can be proud of it and wear it as a badge of honor, like Steve Bannon said. And I must admit, it is nice to hear someone with a moderated tone, someone who's not a complete moron. But at the same time, Jeff, it's like, the lizard people that Alex Jones talks about. On the outside, you look like a good guy, Jeff. On the outside, you talk very calmly. You have a very good presentation. You look the part. America still loves their white men, tall white men. But on the inside, your politics are just as disgusting as Donald Trump's. So you have to ask yourself the question, Jeff, is there anybody, are there enough people in the Republican Party who want to put the facade back up? Are there enough people in the Republican Party who want to put up this fake image of something more than what Donald Trump has revealed them to be? I hope not. I hope not. The only thing I'm gambling is whether or not there are enough Americans outside of that 33% and that potential 17% who are indifferent to the racism of the 33%. Are there enough of us to put these people out of power permanently, so that the only real arguments that we have, the real Overton window in the United States, should be between neoliberals and progressives, not these fascists on the right? So that's all the time I have for you today. Thanks for hanging out with me all week long. Thanks to our newest patrons. So many new patrons that I'm doing bonus content again. You guys have kicked me back into shape. Join me for today's bonus show, patrons only. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show to become a patron. Today I'm talking about the economic power of Rihanna. What she just did to Snapchat is worth an entire conversation. I'll see you over there for that discussion on Patreon.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.